And welcome back to the Pokemon Team Creation Series. That's what it's called, but it's the only one of my creation series where I don't label it this series and then put the character. I go, that and the Lantern Corps, I suppose. Although that's not a creation series. But anyway, it's very prudent that we ended the Jaden as the lead of the original Duel Monsters What If, and Seth, the official, Xenomon, the official, asked what was Jaden Yuki's Pokemon team. So you know what? It comes full circle. So, yeah. So, last week I did a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card, which did in fact have a character to some degree. That was difficult in its own right. This was difficult in a very different way, because there is enough about Jaden where we can create a team, but the issue actually came in finding Mon that really matched the creative things for that team. Let's get one of these ones out of the way right now. So, for example, Winged Kuriboh. If you're making a Jaden Yuki Pokemon team, you gotta have Winged Kuriboh. That was his partner, his friend, from the very beginning of the series. Now, granted, yeah, he had Yubel before then, but we're talking about the beginning of the series as we met him. And so, Winged Kuriboh has been there since the get. He's always had Winged Kuriboh. And I love Winged Kuriboh. I actually have a Winged Kuriboh in the makeshift deck that I had. Because people have asked me, what kind of archetype did I play? And my answer was very simple. I did not play an archetype. Because I really played the game prior to archetypes really being a thing. I got out of the game right after, say, the Neospatian stuff. Right around there. That's when I stopped really playing. Right when, Synchro Monsters started being a thing. But no, yeah, one of the things I kept in my makeshift deck after my original deck got stolen, not just my original deck, mind you, but all of my rares and the binder I had, someone just picked it up and stole it one day, and that was my bad. That was my stupid, and then I had to create stuff from the bottom, or build things up from the bottom. But you know what? It is what it is. You learn a lesson, and I still got my car. I still got cards. And I still honestly have, I think, for a makeshift deck, a solid deck. But yeah, Winged Kuriboh was one of them. Point being, though, is that I needed a Winged Kuriboh Pokemon. And I had one route to go with it's a fairy type Pokemon, a fairy type card, Yu-Gi-Oh card. So a fairy type made it to my mind on a list. It also has wings, so it flies. So okay, a flying fairy or a flying type in general. But there's no Mon that really fits the profile of a Winged Kuriboh in the general term of it, because Winged Kuriboh is this little furry puffball with these little tiny legs and these little angel-like wings. There is no fairy type, let alone flying type, that even comes close to matching the description, save for Woobat. And Woobat would be for physical description alone. So, okay, what can I use here? We also have Winged Kuriboh level 10. Could I work off of that a little bit? And really, no, I couldn't. So where did I go? Ultimately, I went with this. Because Winged Kuriboh is also depicted as a dual spirit, which it is, and he's Jaden Yuki's main partner, I went with Fluttermane. Not Mischievous, but Fluttermane, which is a ghost fairy type. It also, nowhere near close to Winged Kuriboh per se. It's a little on the furry side, fluffy furry, whatever you call it. It's got these two giant wings. I mean, it's technically got 4 wings right there, but it's got 2 giant wings. And it is a ghost type as well as a fairy type. So it represents the spirit aspect of Winged Kuriboh. Now, is that the best one I could find? For me, yeah. If you want to figure out a different Mon to represent Winged Kuriboh, by all means have that. So Winged Kuriboh. But also, there's the fact that he has his Neospatians and his Elemental Heroes precisely. And luckily, there is a Pokemon that it really honestly represents both those aspects in one. And that would be Palafin, particularly in its hero form. Palafin is Elemental Hero Neos, Aqua Dolphin, all wrapped into one, pretty much. And so that made 100% sense to have it there. Now, I do have one other one on the team that represent Neos. This is more of a representation of the culmination of Elemental Hero Neos and Aqua Dolphin. I also have 2 other Elemental Heroes to be represented on the list, but we'll get to that. So, after the fact, we also have the fact that Jaden is the reincarnation of the Supreme King. And luckily, we do in fact have a High King Pokemon in Calyrex. Calyrex is I believe it's the high king Pokemon, not just the king Pokemon, but the high king Pokemon. So the fact is, this would make 100% sense for Jaden to have on his team. I didn't want to go with as one Calyrex with either a Spectrier or Glacier, just because that actually doesn't really work. I mean, yeah, the Supreme King rode a horse, but that wasn't really a defining trait of this character really that much. Nor was it ultimately what's the best way to put it? Nor do I think it would just make sense for him to have it. Although, to be fair, I could have done the all is one Calyrex with Spectrier to represent when Supreme King kind of went dark in the 3rd season. So, I don't know. You could have maybe done that, especially represent the gentle darkness. I'll say this: if you wanted to go that route, I wouldn't necessarily be against it. But that would really only be a representation of one part of the Supreme King, and it's not even who the Supreme King really is. So, because Jaden, technically the Supreme King holding the gentle darkness, is actually supposed to be a positive force, not a negative force. But speaking of the Supreme King, we needed a Yubel on the team. Now, if you saw my Jaden Yuki video, then or the what if I was doing, then you know what Yubel ultimately is. Yubel is ultimately a friend of the Supreme King who went through multiple transformations, procedures, mysticism to morph himself into the demonic gender mixed creature that Yubel ultimately was. And Yubel is a very powerful card if you know how to use it properly. However, it's also a card / monster that is very difficult to find a Pokemon representation for, because it is very demonic looking in design. And in terms of Mon that represent that is a far few who really represent that. There really aren't a lot of demonic looking Pokemon, like truly demonic looking Pokemon, or even Pokemon that are relatively close to that. So I'm like, okay, let's look at a different side of this. Yubel, demonic, had darkness in it, but is also doing everything they did out of love for Jaden. So what if I lean towards more of a duality with this? Well, okay, the only dark fairy type we have is Grimmsnarl, and I guess it's kind of demonic looking, but it's more like reminiscent of a troll or something along those lines. So I didn't really like that. I didn't love that. So, okay, I can't really use dark, but what if I use a fairy that's a bit more on the sinister side? And ultimately, because even though Yubel technically is agendered, I believe it is, non-binary, Yubel definitely has masculine, but also feminine qualities to it. In fact, appearance-wise, and especially if you go with the dub, Yubel definitely sounds more like a she and gives off the vibe more of a she than a he. But again, Yubel technically is neither. They're neither and both at the same time, actually. So I went with a fairy that is feminine in nature, is known to be sinister and evil, a little bit on the evil side. I went with Hatterene. Hatterene's Pokedex entry states that it actually, I believe, has people wander in so we can hit them, attack them and kill them. Hatterene. Just getting its actual Pokedex entry right up here right now so I can reference it effectively here. So yeah, Hatterene is solitary and reclusive in nature, emitting psychic energy strong enough to cause headaches, and as a method to deter others from approaching and disturbing it. It also has been observed that it dislikes loud noises, tearing apart perpetrators with its claws and its tentacles as a result. It plays with people's minds, creates illusions, deceiving them for its own pleasure due to its long hair obstructing its floating body. Hatterene's main focus of forms of locomotion are levitation and short-distance teleportation. It lives in forests with no other living creatures nearby, and as such is known as a forest witch. So, again, not 100% there with it for the descriptor, but it is. I think it's actually not a bad representation for. Think words here. For Yubel. So yeah, that leaves us the last two are more representations of the elemental hero side of Jaden. For elemental hero Neos, like just straight Neos, I went with Lucario. The reason for that is it's a fighting type, and the elemental heroes are generally depicted as war fighters and heroes and all that. So fighting type made sense. Its aura though ability does lend itself again to kind of like the gentle darkness, Neospatian energy, all that kind of stuff. So I liked that to represent elemental hero Neos. That said, though, I needed one other card, and I went at this, or one other monster, because at this point, most of Jaden's quirks are a little regular, let's call it. But, so, ultimately, that came down to Elemental Hero Flame Wingman. His original ace, his original, go-to card, all that. The problem, honestly, the biggest problem with Elemental Hero Flame Wingman is when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh cards and converting them to a Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh cards can be so freaking over-designed or so uniquely designed that having a Pokemon that's a one-to-one to them is a next to impossibility. Flame Wingman is one of these cards because it's a humanoid warrior with a dragon head that breathes fire for its right arm, one normal arm, and then one wing on the left side of its body. It's only got one wing and a tail. So it's kind of this weird reptilian dragon warrior guy. There is nothing even remotely close to that in Pokemon. Initially, I'm like, let's try Armor Rouge. No, that doesn't really work. Volcaroa's kind of got the wing thing down, but doesn't really work for a warrior. No legendary really fits that bill at all. So I'm like, okay, I need to think more outside the box here. What I need is a kind of flying type Pokemon that can learn fire moves. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a fire type Pokemon either. It doesn't have to be a fire flying, but it just needs to be a Pokemon that can fly and can learn fire type moves. And if it can have a design that leans more towards like a warrior, that'd be cool. I would appreciate that. And ultimately, what I did ultimately come down to is Dragonite. Dragonite, being a dragon type and being a flying type, fits in it. It has the humanoid-esque bipedal design that Flame Wingman would need. And it can learn multiple fire type moves, including Fire Punch, which would, I think, lean itself more towards Flame Wingman than anything else here. So there is ultimately the Jaden Yuki Pokemon team. Now, unlike before, I didn't bring it up here, which sucks, but I can remember off the top of my head here. I actually went about looking for types that this team would be weak and strong against, ultimately. In terms of types this team would be weak against, right out the gate, poison is a serious problem for this team. Half this team would get curb stomped by poison because grass is weak to poison, and fairy is weak to poison. Steel types would also be a mild problem as steel resists dragon and is strong against the two fairy types as well. Another mon that completely wrecks this team is bug types. Bug types are actually a problem for this team because Calyrex is ×4 weak to bug. You got ×2 weak on Hatterene for bug. Not to mention that fighting has issues with bug as well, though the steel type helps mitigate that. And ice types. Ice types are actually a severe problem for this team because flying types get wrecked by ice, as do dragons. And ice types get wrecked by flying as well. Fairy is not really a problem thanks to Lucario's steel typing, fortunately. And ghost types. Ghost types are another problem because Fluttermane gets hit by Ghost. Ghost is immune to any normal or fighting type moves here, which means some of Lucario's moves are just out of the luck. Hatterene is going to be hit by ghost types pretty hard, being psychic, and Calyrex being psychic is going to be hit by ghost types. So you got ice, poison, ghost, and bug. Those are your biggest problems for this team. Which those are four types that are commonly used. But in terms of advantages this team actually does very well against dragons, as a third of it is fairy on its own, and two very powerful fairies as well. Solid base stats, probably technically the biggest base stats go to Palafin in its transformed form. This team also does fairly well against water types, as Dragonite can learn electric type moves as well. Calyrex can learn grass type moves. So you have that benefit as well. This team's good against psychic types, very good against psychic types, actually. This team's also good against. It's actually good. Ironically, this team is also not bad against. What was I gonna say? I actually blanked on what I was gonna say. It's good against rock types. Solid against steel types, actually, despite the fact it's got 2 fairies on the team. The rest of the team really actually will best balance out, particularly because this Dragonite learned a fire type move. So, I think it's actually you got 2 fairies on the team, which could be an issue, but fairies is pretty strong type, and you don't have any other types repeating on this team beyond the fairies. So it's actually pretty balanced out from a type, except for psychic. But it's pretty balanced out from a type perspective. And the 2 types that repeat psychic and fairy are very powerful types. So you could be doing worse for type repetition. Either way, though, this I think is the best I could do for Jaden Yuki's Pokemon team. What would you do? Would you do something different? What's your best representation of Kuriboh or Yubel? Or Elemental Hero from England, or if you were to use other Elemental Heroes on here, or other Neospatians. Technically speaking, I could make a Season 1, 2, 3, and 4 Pokemon team for Jaden. This actually, hypothetically, would be his Season 4 team right here, if we were to do it in that vein. Because otherwise, I would backtrack. I would not have Supreme... I mean, yeah, he is the incarnation of Supreme King, but I probably would take out the Supreme King. I'd have to take out Hatterene, the Yubel, so for like a Season 2 deck, or Season 3 deck. And then I'd actually probably be adding more Neospatians in there. And then if I scaled back even more, honestly, those 2 decks would probably be roughly the same. But if I scale back to Season 1, then I'm ditching then I'm actually just straight out ditching Lucario. And I'm actually probably even ditching, I might even be ditching Palafin at that point. I probably would be ditching Palafin at that point. Because even though he is a representation of Elemental Heroes, he's also a big representation of the Neospatians as well. So at that point, yes, Season 1 Jaden's deck, or Pokemon team, would probably look drastically different than this Jaden's Pokemon team. But that's just my opinion. Maybe if you want me to do Season 1 Jaden, I'll do Season 1 Jaden, and then I'll redub this Season 4 later down the road. But until then, let me know what you think. Until then, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will see you folks for the next one.